The full moon illuminated the desolate terrain, its long, cold shadows stretching over the broken, moss-covered tombstones. For decades, the cemetery had been forgotten, lost amid the unchecked growth of the city, until one day, the silence was broken by the sound of heavy machinery, preparing the ground for a new real estate project. However, what was meant to be a simple excavation quickly turned into a macabre nightmare. Under the blades of the excavators, the first signs emerged that the ground concealed something much more sinister. Bodies, aligned in perfect rows, emerged from the earth like ghosts from the past, bringing with them a mystery buried long ago. Local authorities were called in, but nothing could have prepared them for what was to come. As the bones were exhumed, local historian Rafael Albuquerque watched with a mix of curiosity and unease. He had always known there was something strange about that cemetery. Old stories, whispered through generations, spoke of a dark sect that, in centuries past, used the place for macabre rituals. But no one ever imagined that those legends could have any basis in truth. The bodies, decomposed by time, bore marks that could not be ignored. Strange symbols engraved on the bones, precise cuts suggesting some unknown form of surgery, and most disturbingly, all the skulls were empty, with no sign of brains. The perplexity grew with each new discovery, and the cemetery, once abandoned, became the center of an investigation that would soon take a terrifying turn. In the days that followed, a wave of panic swept through the city. The first murder occurred the night after the discovery of the bodies. A young woman, found dead in her apartment, bore the same marks on her bones as the exhumed corpses. The modus operandi was eerily similar. Symbols carved into the flesh, the skull empty. And so, like an invisible plague, the murders continued, each one more brutal than the last. Rafael, now neck-deep in the investigation, knew he was dealing with something far greater than he could have imagined. The evidence pointed to a connection between the bodies in the cemetery and the recent crimes, but the truth, as always, was hidden in the shadows. He began to delve deep into the city's history, uncovering secrets that should never have come to light. What he found not only threatened his sanity but also put his own life in danger. The city was being consumed by an ancient evil, an evil Raphael knew could only be fought if he could unravel the enigma of the abandoned cemetery. But with each step he took, more questions arose, and time was running out. The next murder could be his. The cold night wind blew through the deserted streets, whistling through dark alleys and making the windows rattle as if the city itself were trembling with fear. Rafael Albuquerque walked quickly, the sound of his footsteps echoing on the sidewalk. His thoughts were in turmoil, reflecting on the disturbing discoveries he had made that day. He had spent hours sifting through the local museum's archives, diving into old documents and forgotten accounts. The stories he found were not the usual urban legends. There was something extraordinarily real about those accounts, something that made his blood run cold. The symbols found on the bodies were not mere random drawings. They belonged to a forgotten alphabet, used by an ancient sect that, according to legend, practiced necromantic rituals to control the souls of the dead. The connections to the cemetery were undeniable. The land where the bodies were found had once housed a clandestine temple where the sect carried out its dark rituals. Those sacrificed there were considered offerings to ancient gods, and their brains were removed in a ritualistic process, believed to contain the essence of the soul. The corpses, deprived of this essence, were buried in the cemetery as empty shells, a practice that continued until the sect mysteriously disappeared, along with its members, in the early 19th century. But what disturbed Raphael the most was the connection to the recent murders. Everything indicated that someone was trying to revive the ancient rituals. But who? And why? It was clear that the perpetrator had a deep knowledge of the city's forgotten history, perhaps even a direct connection to the extinct sect. As he walked through the streets, Raphael felt like he was being followed. He turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just darkness and the distant sound of a siren cutting through the night air. His instincts were on high alert, as if something or someone was watching him from the shadows. He finally arrived at his house, a small two-story residence in the historic center of the city. He locked the door behind him and took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He made his way to his office, where he spread out the documents he had copied from the museum on the desk. Old maps, burial records, even newspaper clippings yellowed with age. Among them was a detailed map of the cemetery, showing the exact locations where the bodies were buried. Raphael noticed a pattern. The graves formed a kind of circle around an old crypt located in the center of the cemetery. The crypt was a stone structure, covered in ivy, that he vaguely remembered seeing during the excavations. According to the records, it was the tomb of an influential 19th-century family, but the dates and names were engraved in an illegible manner due to erosion. However, one detail caught his attention. None of the exhumed bodies were listed as being buried in the crypt. This suggested that the crypt might be empty, or worse, containing something that had been forgotten for a long time. Determined to investigate, Raphael decided that he would return to the cemetery the next morning. But before he could plan his next steps, a sharp sound cut through the silence of the house. A metallic noise, followed by the creaking of wood. Someone was forcing their way in. Raphael froze, his heart racing in his chest. He was not alone. He quickly turned off the lights and grabbed the first object he could find to defend himself, a heavy bronze candlestick that sat on the fireplace. Stealthy footsteps echoed down the stairs, each creak increasing the dread that consumed him. Whoever it was, they were about to find him. And then, the office door slowly opened, revealing a hooded figure. Before Raphael could react, the figure entered the room, closing the door behind them. Time seemed to stop as Raphael's eyes adjusted to the darkness. The intruder didn't move, but the silence was broken by a low, sinister voice that echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have unearthed the secrets of the past, Raphael. Now, you belong to them." The air seemed to grow thicker, almost palpable, as the hooded figure remained still at the entrance of the office. Raphael didn't dare breathe, his mind racing as he tried to formulate a plan. The dark voice still reverberated in his ears, and the implicit threat in those words made him realize how close he was to danger. But instead of attacking, the figure took a step back, remaining in the shadows. Raphael's eyes, adjusted to the darkness, caught a faint glimmer under the hood, a reflection of something the figure was holding in their hands. It was a small object, perhaps a medallion, but the most disturbing detail was the symbol engraved on it, the same one Raphael had found on the exhumed bodies. The intruder was connected to the rituals, but what was their intention? Before Raphael could find out, the figure moved with surprising speed, throwing something on the floor. A glass vial shattered into 1,000 pieces, releasing a dense smoke that quickly filled the room. Raphael caught the pungent smell, a mixture of herbs and something chemical, but he didn't have time to process what it was before being overcome by a strong dizziness. His legs gave way, and he fell to his knees, his vision blurring as the figure slowly approached. "This is just the beginning," the voice whispered as the intruder leaned over Raphael. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the medallion being placed in his hand, its cold metallic surface burning against his skin. Raphael awoke hours later, the dawn faintly illuminating the office. He was lying on the floor, the medallion still clutched in his trembling hand. The headache was excruciating, and his whole body ached as if he had been hit by a truck. He struggled to get up, trying to piece his thoughts together. What had happened? Why was he still alive? As he struggled to recall the details of the previous night, he noticed something strange in the office. The mess he had left on the desk had been organized. The documents and maps were carefully stacked, as if someone had gone through everything without leaving a trace. Additionally, there was a small envelope on the desk that he knew wasn't there before. With trembling hands, Raphael opened the envelope. Inside, he found a single folded sheet of paper and a small piece of black cloth, which he recognized as part of a ritualistic garment. The sheet contained a handwritten message with an old and elegant script. "The past should not be unearthed. The truth is sealed in the crypt, where it must remain. Do not search further, or the dead will come after you." Raphael felt a chill run down his spine. The threat was clear, but at the same time, the letter confirmed what he already suspected. The crypt in the cemetery was the key to solving the mystery. Whatever was sealed inside was what the cult was trying to protect or hide. Against all logic, Raphael knew he couldn't simply let this go. He needed to know the truth, even if it put his life at risk. The historian's instinct, the need to discover and document, was stronger than the fear. He spent the day preparing, knowing he couldn't face the unknown unprepared. He visited old colleagues who could provide him with equipment and advice, gathering flashlights, cameras, and even a weapon, in case he needed to defend himself. He also researched more about the crypt, finding references to seals and magical protections that might have been used to lock whatever was inside. By nightfall, Raphael was once again standing before the gates of the abandoned cemetery. The silence was oppressive, and he could swear he felt something watching him from the shadows. The sparse, overgrown tombstones seemed more alive than they should, as if they were awaiting his arrival. With a flashlight in one hand and the medallion in the other, Raphael moved forward with determination. The crypt loomed before him, dark and imposing, like a guardian of the forgotten past. The stone door was ajar, something that shouldn't have been possible. His fingers involuntarily tightened around the medallion, feeling the strange energy emanating from it. As he pushed the door open, a rush of cold air hit him, as if he were opening a portal to another world. Raphael knew that once he entered, there would be no turning back. The darkness would swallow him, and he would have to face whatever was lurking within. And so, with one last breath of courage, he crossed the threshold. Inside the crypt, the air was heavy and dense, filled with the smell of earth and mold. The stone walls reflected the light of Raphael's flashlight in somber tones, casting shadows that seemed to dance around him. He felt the weight of history on his shoulders, as if the souls of the dead were watching every step he took, waiting to see if he was worthy of uncovering their secrets. The floor of the crypt was covered in a thin layer of dust that didn't seem to have been disturbed for centuries. However, as he moved forward, Raphael noticed something that made his heart race. Recent footprints, still clear in the dust. Someone had been there before him, and not too long ago. The footprints led to a narrow staircase that descended into the depths below. The cold grew more intense with each step Raphael took, as if he were approaching something that the earth itself was trying to hide. Finally, he reached an underground chamber, a circular room whose walls were covered in symbols carved into the stone, the same symbols he had seen on the bodies and the medallion. In the center of the room was a stone sarcophagus, sealed with rusty chains and covered in esoteric markings. Raphael approached slowly, feeling the fear growing inside him. He knew, without a doubt, that the sarcophagus was the heart of the enigma, the source of the evil that haunted the city. When he touched the chains, they disintegrated in his hands, as if they had waited centuries for that moment. The seal was broken. Something was about to be unleashed. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with a blinding light, and Raphael stepped back, raising the flashlight in a futile gesture of defense. At the center of the light, a figure emerged, the same hooded figure that had confronted him at his home. But this time, the hood was removed, revealing a face that seemed to belong to another era, marked by scars and hollow eyes, like black holes that sucked away all hope. "You shouldn't have come," the figure whispered, its voice now sounding like a chorus of tormented souls. "What's buried here is too much power to be understood. Too much power for any human being." Raphael, however, did not back down. He knew he had come too far to give up now. Something inside him, a courage he didn't know he possessed, pushed him forward. He raised the medallion, which now glowed with a light of its own, as if drawn to the sarcophagus. "You're not the first to try," the figure continued, taking a step toward Raphael. "And you won't be the last. This place, this sarcophagus, is a portal, a bridge between the world of the living and the dead. Those who were buried here tried to open this passage but were stopped. Now, the decision is yours. Open the portal and free the imprisoned souls, or seal this place forever." Raphael felt the weight of the decision upon him. If he freed the souls, he might end the cycle of murders and restore peace to the city, but at a terrible cost. He would open a passage to an unknown world where unimaginable horrors could enter his own. On the other hand, sealing the sarcophagus would mean leaving those souls trapped forever, but would prevent the evil from spreading. With his heart pounding in his ears, Raphael made his decision. He approached the sarcophagus and, with a strength he didn't know he had, pushed the heavy stone lid. The chamber was filled with a deep sound, like a groan coming from the earth's depths. The flashlight flickered and went out, leaving him in total darkness, except for the glow of the medallion in his hand. Inside the sarcophagus, what Raphael saw was not a corpse but a pulsing darkness, a black mist that seemed alive, writhing and whispering with 1,000 different voices. It was the portal, and it was about to open. Raphael knew he had only one chance. He lifted the medallion above the sarcophagus, using all his strength to throw it into the mist. The moment the medallion touched the darkness, there was a flash of light so intense that Raphael was thrown back, hitting the chamber wall. When the light finally dimmed, the chamber was quiet. The sarcophagus was closed again, and the rusty chains had reappeared, sealing it once more. The hooded figure had vanished, and Raphael found himself alone in the crypt, the sound of his own heartbeat the only thing he could hear. Exhausted and shaken, Raphael climbed the stairs, emerging into the cool night air. The cemetery was shrouded in silence, but it was a different silence, peaceful. He knew the evil had been contained, at least for now. But the story of that place would continue to haunt his mind. Raphael looked toward the horizon, where the city began to awaken with the first rays of the sun. He knew he had closed a dark chapter, but at the same time, he felt this would not be the last time the past would try to emerge from the shadows. He would live with the knowledge that somewhere deep within the earth, something awaited, and that one day, someone might be tempted to unearth it again. With one last look at the cemetery, Raphael walked away, knowing that while the enigma of the abandoned cemetery had been resolved, the shadows of history would never completely leave him.